Well, that's another form of self-abandonment. Is many of us were judged a lot. I certainly was when I was growing up. And so we incorporated that voice into that inner critic, and we come down hard on ourselves. Our feelings are not okay. What's the matter with you? You're not good enough. You'll never be good enough. You're not worthy. You're not worthy of love. You're flawed. You're not important. I mean, people are trained from they're programmed from the time they're little to judge themselves. Well, again, if you think about a child coming to you upset and you just say, "Oh, don't cry over something. Don't be a baby. What's the matter with you?" That child's going to feel abandoned. And that's what we do to ourselves. We can think of our feelings like an inner child, if you want, and we're abandoning that inner child by not attending to our own feelings.
My next guest is an expert on how to love yourself. Margaret Paul has a PhD in psychology and is celebrated by thousands of people, including celebrities like Alanis Morissette and Lindsay Wagner. She's a prolific author who has appeared on television and radio shows, including Oprah, and she's also an artist. I am excited to find out more about her program, Inner Bonding.
You are watching Profonde TV with host Phyllis Haynes.
Dr. Paul, I am so delighted to see you. It's a pleasure. I know that we have talked before. I'd like to call you Margaret, if I may, but I'm delighted to have you on the program.
So thank you so much, Phyllis.
I'm really curious about inner bonding. I really want to know what it is and how you've come to this work. Can you give us an insight?
Yeah, so inner bonding is a 6-step self-healing process that heals amazingly. It heals anxiety, depression, guilt and shame, and anger, and relationships and addictions. It's just such a powerful, loving, self-healing process. And it came about because like so many people, I grew up in a dysfunctional home. I was an only kid, and I was a nervous kid. And when I was 5 years old, my mother took me to a psychiatrist, and he did a terrible job. And I remember thinking, I could do a better job than you. I was 5, and that's when I decided to do this work. And so I worked as a traditional psychotherapist for 17 years, and I just was not happy with the results of my own therapy and the results with other people. And that's when I asked my higher guidance, I had been working on a spiritual level, for a process that would really work fast and deep for people, that they could learn, that they could do themselves, that they wouldn't always have to come to a therapist for. And that's when I kind of downloaded the inner bonding process. And that was 36 years ago. And I've been practicing it the whole time. It's been completely life-changing for me and for so many people around the world. It's been evolving because it's an evolving process all this time, and I'm thrilled to share it.
You have celebrity endorsements, in fact, who have taken your process. I gather since that you have them on your website, I have permission to mention a couple of names. So Alanis Morissette is one of them. Who else is giving you permission to share that they've done your work?
Well, Dr. Sue Morter, Marcy Shimoff, Jack Canfield, a lot of people have endorsed this work. I've been very, very fortunate that the people have really understood what this work is about and have endorsed it. Lindsay Wagner, who's an actress, I've known her for many years, and she used to send everybody she worked with to inner bonding, or she wouldn't work with them, because it makes relationships so much easier.
So inner bonding, you talked a bit in preparation for this about self-abandonment. Yes. What is that?
Okay, so most people have learned 4 ways of abandoning themselves. and they don't realize it. They don't realize what's happening when they're doing this. So one of the ways is, most of us had a lot of pain when we were growing up, and we couldn't handle it. And so our pain is in our body. We learn to get up in our head and not be connected to our body. So one way of abandoning ourselves is to stay in our head. And if you think about a child coming to you upset, and instead of attending to the child, you're just busy, you're on the computer, you're reading, you're off, that child's going to feel rejected and abandoned. Well, that's what happens on the inner level. The other thing we do, the second thing we do is that we judge ourselves.
No, wait, I need to slow you down. So you're saying, I want to make sure I understand this, that when we are caught up in our own pain, we go into our heads and we ignore the rest of our being, the rest of our bodies. Is that an accurate understanding of what you're saying?
Yeah, that's right. We've learned to disconnect from our feelings and even to judge our feelings, because most of us have no idea how to learn from our feelings. Everybody is about learning the messages. Our feelings are a source of inner guidance, and we need them. They're giving us important information about whether we're loving ourselves or abandoning ourselves, whether other people are being open or closed, loving or unloving. Our feelings are an enormous source of guidance. So when we cut off from them, we're deeply rejecting and abandoning ourselves.
Dr. Paul, I have been rewarded in life for not expressing feelings, for keeping my feelings to myself. So you're saying that that's not necessarily a good thing,
I'm not talking about necessarily expressing feelings to somebody else. I'm talking about tuning into our own feelings and learning to take responsibility for them, not making other people responsible, but learning to learn from them and take responsibility for them.
Okay. So now you started to go into self-judgment, but I wanted to clarify self-abandonment. So what's going on there?
Well, that's another form of self-abandonment. Is many of us were judged a lot. I certainly was when I was growing up. And so we incorporated that voice into that inner critic, and we come down hard on ourselves. Our feelings are not okay. What's the matter with you? You're not good enough. You'll never be good enough. You're not worthy. You're not worthy of love. You're flawed. You're not important. I mean, people are trained from they're programmed from the time they're little to judge themselves. Well, again, if you think about a child coming to you upset, and you just say, oh, don't cry over something. Don't be a baby. What's the matter with you? That child's going to feel abandoned. And that's what we do to ourselves. We can think of our feelings like an inner child, if you want. And we're abandoning that inner child by not attending to our own feelings.
So for any parents that are listening, how do we avoid having that experience with a child? How do you know the child touches a stove and your reaction is, don't do that? What's a proper response from your perspective?
Well, here's the thing, is that as long as we're treating ourselves badly, we're going to project that onto our children. Because all of these forms of self-abandonment are forms of control. We're trying to control ourselves, get ourselves to do it right so that other people will like us. Well, we do the same thing to kids. We project our own self-abandonment onto kids. It becomes very easy to know how to be there for a child in a loving and caring and compassionate way when we learn to do that for ourselves. But there's no way to be that way with a child when we're abandoning ourselves, and children pick up the energy of that. And even if you're able to be compassionate with a child, if you're not with yourself, they're going to learn not to be compassionate with themselves. If you're not taking responsibility for your feelings, they're going to learn not to take responsibility for their feelings. We're the role models for raising personally responsible kids. We have to do that for ourselves first.
Now, people who watch this program know that I'm very interested in not only the work of individuals, but how they apply that work to their own lives. So can you tell me honestly, Dr. Paul, that you are compassionate with yourself?
Yes. So when I first started practicing inner bonding 36 years ago, I realized that I was a very anxious person. I was a very anxious kid, very anxious adult. And I started to realize that most of my anxiety was coming from this self judgment. Now, that was an addiction. When you've been doing that your whole life, you're addicted to it. And so I started to notice the anxiety and to notice the judgments that were causing it. And it took me about a year to stop judging myself. And I never judge myself now. When I get a feeling, I open to learning about it. This is part of inner bonding, is that either our intention is to learn about what's true and what's loving to ourselves, or our intention is to try and get love and approval and avoid pain, which is a lot of what self-judgment's about. So I learned to stop judging and instead move into compassion for myself. And that is what I do now. I move into compassion for anything, anytime I feel anything other than peace inside. I've learned to stay in my body. That took me a long time to learn that because I was in my head. I was a caretaker. I was taking care of everybody else, but not me. It took me a long time to get in my body. Now I know the minute I feel anything other than peace inside and fullness, and I attend with compassion and a desire to learn about how I'm treating myself, what I'm telling myself, that's causing anything other than peace inside.
Well, it sounds like a course that people work with you on is a very interesting course. Is it hard work? Or let me start with a simpler question. What's the course like? What happens when people sign up to work with you in this way?
Well, they sign up in different ways. Some people work with me individually, like on Zoom now. Some people, like I'm going to be doing a 5-day intensive. I do 5-day intensives periodically. I do workshops, and so people sign up for various things. They read my books. They go on the website. There's a free course. There's many ways that they can learn inner bonding, depending on what they want. I teach 3-day courses. There's a course called Love Yourself that really teaches inner bonding in a very in-depth way. So it just depends on how people like to learn. I've got a huge course called Self-Quest that's really very
That title again? Can you say the title again?
Self-Quest. I've worked on this for 20 years. It's an online membership and it really teaches inner bonding in a very, very in-depth way. So for people who like to work on a computer, that's a great way to learn it. There's many ways of learning it.
So you're a PhD in psychology. What's the difference between what you're doing and the typical psychological engagement?
Well, I had a lot of therapy, and I got to tell you, not one therapist told me that I was responsible for my own feelings. They just perpetuated me feeling like a victim, nor did they tell me any ways of dealing with or learning or managing pain, nor did they help me understand how to connect with my higher self, my higher source of love and truth. Not one, not a single one. And so we teach people a very easy method for accessing their higher knowing their true source of love, and we teach them the process for how to learn from and take responsibility for their feelings. That's very different than traditional therapy.
Dr. Paul, Margaret, how does this apply to relationships?
Well, it's very, very powerful. I've been working with relationships for 53 years and I'm very successful because the main problem in relationships is when people abandon themselves and then they make the other person responsible. It's like if you had a child, instead of wanting to love the child, you keep giving the child away to somebody else and say, you love this child. I don't want to love this child. Well, that creates huge problems. And the minute we make somebody else responsible for our feelings, then we have to try and control them. And that is what happens in relationships is we expect the other person to make us feel worthy and lovable. And then when they don't do it, we get hurt and we try and control them. We give ourselves up, we get mad. And of course, that creates a lot of relationship problems. When people learn to love themselves and they take responsibility for their feelings and they learn to access a higher source of love, they fill themselves up with love to share. It's no longer about trying to get love. It's now about sharing love. And that's what a loving relationship is all about. So when people do learn to love themselves, their relationship transforms.
It sounds like both partners, if it's a male-female or two males or whatever configuration, two partners need to come in and work with you together, it seems to me.
Yeah, but even if one person doesn't, see, people are in a system. Not always are both people available. So they create a system between them that's not working. When one person changes the system, the whole system has to change. Now, we never know how it's going to change. If it's a system where one person, for example, is the taker and quite narcissistic, and the other is the caretaker and giving themselves up, if the caretaker starts taking care of themselves, it'll go one way or another. The taker might get mad and say, no, I got to get somebody else to take care of me, and the relationship will go into turmoil. Or the taker might say, you know, you're a lot more attractive this way. I got to find out what you're doing, and I want to do the work too. So that's what happens most of the time with the people I work with, but not all of the time.
So I'm interested in the life of Dr. Margaret Paul. What's your life look like? Because it seems to me, I've interviewed therapists over, as you talk about 50 years, I would say at least over 25 years. And a lot of people don't have their lives together, but I have a sense that you have an exquisite life. So talk about your life.
Okay, well, let me go back a little, because when I started, I was in that relationship where I was the caretaker. And so when I started to take care of myself, my husband was not having anything to do with it, and my 30-year marriage ended, which was very painful for me. The things that I was afraid of happened, because I was so afraid if I loved myself, everybody who said they loved me, I would see that they didn't, and that's what happened. My kids were mad. My parents disowned me. Everybody liked how I took care of them, but they did not want me to take care of myself. So it was a very hard time. Now, I love my life. I live with my best friend. We're Golden Girls. We live on a 35-acre ranch. We have horses, which was my dream since I was a kid. And I'm amazed at my life. I love my life at this point. Now my best friend is the co-creator of Inner Bonding, Dr. Erica Topich. She's my golden girl. And so she's the one that I go to. She's my inner bonding buddy. And when I get stuck with something, I go to her. She gets stuck. She comes to me. We have a big house so that we can have our own space. And we take care of the animals. And so I'm happy. I think living as golden girls when you're older is a wonderful way to live. And I really encourage people, if their marriage ends or somebody dies, to think about living with a friend that you love and that you have fun with. We have so much fun. We laugh so much every day. It's a really wonderful way to live.
Well, that's great. And I also know that you have developed yourself as a wonderful artist. Can you talk about your artwork?
Yeah, so I've been an artist since I was a kid, and I draw and I paint and I do pottery. And a very interesting thing is that because I was an artist my whole life, about 20 years ago, I was selling a house in Los Angeles. And because I was aware of my guidance, as soon as the house sold, I got this message to make sure that I got everything out of the house at least a week before the house sold. I had no idea what it was about. I just had visions of the house crumbling. So I got everything out a week before, and the day after I got everything out, there were construction workers under the house. And they set the house on fire because they saw black widow spiders, and they torched them on dry rot, and they set the house on fire. I had gotten all of my art out of the house the day before. And I was just so grateful for that guidance, because I would have had no way of knowing that was going to happen without my higher guidance. So now at our ranch, I have a ceramic studio, I have a painting studio, and I just get to go and have a great time with that. I love that.
So you talk a lot about higher guidance as if it's a understood concept. But you know and I know that there are still people skeptical about what you mean by this. Can you talk a little bit more about what you mean by higher guidance?
What I mean is whatever works for somebody. It can be their concept of God. It can be Jesus or Allah. It can be their own older, wiser self, their higher soul. It can be an energy, a light. It doesn't matter what it is. We are going to access that when we're truly open to learning about loving ourselves and others. That is, there's two keys to having, accessing spirit is about your frequency. Spirit exists at a higher frequency than we operate at. And it takes two things to raise our frequency. One is our intention to learn about love, and the other is eating well and keeping your body clean with healthy food. Because if you're eating sugar and junk food and industrial seed oils and processed food, you lower the frequency of your body, and that makes it very hard to access your higher guidance. And so, because I love living in connection with my guidance, I am highly motivated to eat really well, which I do, which I've done for many, many years now. And that keeps my frequency high enough to, at that, with the intention to learn to access my.
What do you mean by eating? You mean removing sugar? Are you a vegetarian, or what do you mean?
Vegetarian, because my body does not like that. I mean, I think everybody needs different things, and my body, I tried it. I tried being a vegetarian. I got really sick. No, but I eat all organic, fresh. I don't eat any factory farmed stuff. I eat a lot of fresh organic vegetables. I ferment a lot of foods, and I've been doing this for 58 years because I was a sickly kid. I learned very early, my early 20s, and I'm 81 now. And
really?
Yeah, I'm 81 and I'm extremely healthy. I got a ton of vitality. I don't have any arthritis or any of the diseases that people my age have. And so I know from what I've been doing with inner bonding, exercising every day, and eating well, that it works to keep you healthy and alive and vital and clear your whole life. People don't have to degenerate the way most of the people my age are.
Well, there's also a great deal of joy coming through. So I gather it's fun to work with you. You are fun for the people who come to be in your presence, and also now over Zoom. So is there anything you want to say to prepare people for working with you? Is there something that they need to think about before signing up or pursuing work with Dr. Margaret Paul?
That all they have to do is want to learn how to love themselves, to learn how to share their love, to make love their higher priority. For most people, avoiding pain is their higher priority. And if that's what they want to do, they're not going to learn much from me. But if they really want to learn to be happy, joyful, healthy, to heal their anxiety, their depression, their guilt, their shame, their relationships, their addictions, then I can help them, and I do, and it's very successful.
Well, I just thank you. I will have information at the end of the program on how people can reach you, and I just really thank you. I look forward to more conversations with you.
Me too, Phyllis. Thank you so much.